Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage to moderate our National Service Town Meeting, Mr. David Gergen.
Okay. Good afternoon and welcome. And I think I can speak for all of us who have witnessed this phenomenon called Alan Casey. He's a force of nature. And I think all of us understand that we would not be here today were it not for Alan's wonderful work. Yesterday morning, as the nation began to commemorate 9/11, John Schnurr, who's sitting here, and as you know, founded New Leaders for New Schools, told a story to a group that he'd never told before in public, and it was about his wife. That on 9/11, she was at a meeting in the World Trade Center towers. And as it happened, her meeting was on the 34th floor, and she was able to escape safely. And today they have two wonderful children, ages 3 and 1. And John went on to point out that as he thought about where we are in life today, that there were so many people who happened to be on the 90th floor or above who perished, who had no chance to escape. And there were people on the 70th floor, some escaped and some did not. But he said, you know, isn't that very parallel to the way life is in the country today and in so much of the world? If you're born in the right zip code, if you happen by chance to be born in the right area, you'll probably succeed in life. And if you're born in the wrong zip code, you have almost no chance. And if you're born somewhere in between, maybe, maybe not. But that there's a certain randomness about that, and it really does deny the whole notion that we talked about last night, about the promise of the Declaration, that all men are created equal, all women are created equal, all should have an equal chance at the starting line. And yet they do not. And it's that understanding in the sense that as the world is changing so rapidly with globalization, with technology, there are people who are breaking through, who were born in the right zip code, who were on the 34th floor. And there are so many others who are being left behind. And this brings us to a crucial moment, a moment that in some ways is both, it's a double-edged sword. It's a moment that it confronts us with some of the most serious problems we have faced as a people in a long, long time. Problems that are urgent, that need to be addressed quickly, that will overwhelm us unless we act quickly. And yet, at the same time, we have a coming together, a confluence of events at this moment that are very positive, that are really very hopeful and encouraging. We have universities and foundations and benefactors who speak here or speak elsewhere and are willing to step up and say, let's change, let's be engaged, let's be engaged in this service effort. We had, for the first time in living memory, 2 candidates who would come together last night and both make a commitment, a solemn commitment in front of all of us, in front of a large television audience, that they are both going to support this. We've never had this. This was an important moment for all of us. We have the foundations in place to build on. Foundations built by people like John Bridgeland and Eli Siegel and Harris Wofford and so many others who have put together at the national level organizations and commitments on the part of our national government. But most importantly, by far and away the most important part of this magical moment is the fact that there's a rising generation represented here in this room by so many of you who deeply care about change, about social justice. And you have given this country countless hours and countless efforts. Many of you are social entrepreneurs. You've found new ways to tackle social issues. Many of you have been out as volunteers. But the single most important reason why there's a chance now of seizing upon this moment is the rising generation. This is the most important movement, I must tell you, and the most encouraging movement I've seen among the young since the days of the civil rights movement. And I really see you as the pioneers of a new movement. So it's in that sense that we gather to ask now, okay, we're at this moment. How do we seize it? How do we get from here to there? How do we realize the vision? Where do we go? In very hard, practical terms. We've heard a lot of inspiring talk. That's important. Inspiration is important in life. Words do matter. But actions matter too. And so the question is, how do we get from here to there? That's the purpose of this panel. We have a wonderful panel. I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing them. You have in your seats there, you should have the biographies. You know Michelle Dunn and what she's done with Hands-On with Atlanta and then built it up to a national organization and now has got Points of Light in with it. Who has to introduce Usher? Listen, I was here when he played for the NFL kickoff last week. I still can't hear. But I saw what magic he had with the young people. General Frakely, who is in charge of the recruitment and training of all new enlistees and officers in the United States Army. And believe me, that's a large task. Vanessa Kirsch, who has formed more organizations than most of us could do in a lifetime, but with New Profit and now America Forward. And bears a lot of responsibility for us being here today, too. I think we all know that. And then finally, Mallory, who is, and your last name, Mallory, I have to get this down again, because Mallory has been AmeriCorps. She has done Jumpstart, and she has done, City Year. You've done both. Where's your red jacket?
Oh, I forgot it.
You forgot the red jacket, but you've done all of this in New Orleans.
I have blue denim.
Now tell me, because I'm gonna mangle your last name, so I want to make sure you pronounce it correctly.
We can say Hassol since I'm speaking for myself today. If you see me around.
Okay, Jostle, okay. Mallory Jostle, thank you, Mallory. Okay, let's open up with Vanessa. Vanessa, where do we go from here? How do we build, how do we seize upon this moment? Do we just turn it over to Alan Casey? Or is there something more that we should be doing? You perhaps have had some pillow talk about that subject.
I'm all for that. I think.
But frame this for us. Yeah, where do we go from here?
The thing is, we don't know that we all did just turn it over to Alan Casey without him doing anything. He's just an incredible leader. And I want to actually start talking personally, because I think, our story and what's happened does speak to how this movement is evolving. And, I just am thinking and pinching myself, just being here today with all of you. So many of us, we all have been in this for it's a long journey. But my journey started when I was 25 years old, and I was running Public Allies, and I heard about this great organization in Boston called City Year. And this guy, Harris Wofford, said, you got to go up to Boston and meet your competition. And so for me, national service has been, it's an idea, it's a concept, but it's part of our lives. And I was lucky to meet my wonderful husband, Alan. And we've been on a journey. And when I think of the fact that at 25 years old, I was sitting with people like Eli Siegel, who is so here in spirit, and all of us, I know. I just keep thinking of Eli, and I know he's grinning because we finally are getting incredible bipartisan support, and everything that Eli talked about making service the fabric of our country is really coming true. But to be a young person experiencing and sitting with people like that, and actually inventing and creating something that is today AmeriCorps was an incredible privilege. And then to be sitting here today, thinking about what happened last night with Obama and McCain, talking about these issues, and realizing that we have the opportunity to do something truly amazing to the entirely next level. Taking this to the next level is just, I don't know, it's just hard. I'm speechless. I can barely sort of think every minute, because it's just so incredible what is happening here. And I guess I do, even before I go into, I do want to get into the tactics, because we can be inspiring and it can be great, but we really have work to do. The work just begins, and we have to think about how to. And so I want to. I think that what I heard last night was a talking about a new role for government. And I'm not sure that even the candidates are quite yet articulating what that new role is. And I want to highlight how AmeriCorps, in essence, has been a new role for government. AmeriCorps is not just a government program, as some had talked about it. AmeriCorps has been a way of government investing in what works, investing in the nonprofit sector, investing in organizations like Youth Build, Teach for America, City Year, to actually be the ones delivering service. That's significant, that's different. That is different from the past generations. And I think, you know, what I've seen in McCain's new plan and Obama's plan is that they want to take that to the next level. This is about a public-private partnership, bringing everybody together. So that's different. It's a new role for government, and we have to talk about national service as that kind of new role. Second, I think we have had a long track record now in these organizations producing results. And when Walter Atwood, who was the man from CCC, talked earlier today about planting 3 billion trees, and you know, service has been focused on results. And those results, those trees are just growing now. You know, we're all appreciating them now. But we are starting to see with these social entrepreneurial organizations that we can actually solve social problems with the human capital of national service. And I think increasingly we have to really speak to, we want to eliminate, these problems. We want to change the high school dropout rates. And we have to speak more and more about the specific results. And then lastly, the organizations that in sort of 1992, when we were building AmeriCorps, were small, subscale innovations and entrepreneurial ideas, are now scaling. And you know, I'll just take one for example, Teach for America. Teach for America back then was a small idea. Today, 12% of the student body of Harvard and Spelman are applying. 25,000 young people have applied to Teach for America. We are getting to scale, but there are so many great organizations that aren't at scale. And so we have to think about the capacity to take these good ideas truly to scale to every single community. So those are the three sort of themes that I think we have to think about as we think about taking.
Talk to us a little bit about Hatch Kennedy, the bill that both Obama and McCain, or Senators Obama and McCain, are now supporting. Would you anticipate getting that passed next year?
Absolutely, and I think, you know, we have to do it. You know, I think that today is the beginning, but you know, September 27th, getting citizens out in every community, 2,200 events. By the end of this conference, hopefully it'll be 5,000 events across America. We have to speak to Americans and get them to embrace this in the way that we have in the inner circles. It has to ripple out, and it's starting to. And
what concretely should a group like this be doing when they leave here to ensure we get to the next level, that we get these events done and set later in September? But most importantly, how do we get from here to the passage of legislation? Where does this group fit in?
Well, everybody knows how politics works. We have to get our constituents from the different members of Congress to, they have to speak to their members of Congress. And so, one, everybody has to, get on the ServiceNation website, sign the declaration. We have to rally people for these events, and we have to all continue. And the web is incredible because now with the internet, we can stay connected, and we have to, move the constituents that don't know about this and tell stories and share. So one is just we have to build the political will in citizens.
Do you think you need to build a political organization?
Absolutely. And there are 500,000 young people who've graduated from AmeriCorps, and we need to mobilize those people and get them engaged and speaking up. And it's happening. I mean, it's really happening. We also have to continue to build, and today and yesterday was incredible, a bipartisan support. And this is an issue that everybody agrees on. And I think it's because of the newness of it. It's not just same old, same old.
Everybody has agreed who has appeared here.
Yes. Yeah. We have a lot of work to do.
There are a number of people here who have not appeared. There are a number of people who have not appeared who will also look at the price tag and say, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah. And I thought what was exciting about last night was that people were saying it's not about the money. It's about what this can do at scale. And I think we have to see the leverage. One of the things I think we've missed in selling this idea is, it does have a big price tag on it, but it also is leveraging so many results and so many resources. So the philanthropy community is stepping up. We are able to solve problems in a more efficient way because this is not a big government program. This is about leveraging what people are already doing in the nonprofit sector and we're asking others to participate.
Okay, I'd like to ask Michelle and Usher about the mobilization, and Mallory too, about the mobilization of the younger generation. Let's say that one of the things the legislators will be looking for is what is the evidence that you can get this many people to sign up? How can you get from 75 to 250? Are you really 250,000 in AmeriCorps? Can you in fact do that? Can you mobilize people, and can you find things that they can do that will be really effective, that will make a difference?
I'm going to let the young people talk about mobilizing the young people, and
Okay.
I used to be able to do that. So now, after 20 years, I can talk about mobilizing the middle-aged people. And but I want to say that I think that that the arc that is represented here of service and the sort of unity of this gathering is part of the charge for moving forward. And I think that the very symbolic coming together of this gathering is really what's also necessary to push and take us forward. What we see in the Kennedy Hatch Bill is the coming together of a lot of different streams of service. We see national service and community volunteerism coming together in a way that truly is unified and really is, I think, a remarkable point of differentiation and a new threshold. We see youth engagement, we see seniors, we see international and domestic possibilities. And so I think, and this room represents that continuum. And so I think one of the things that we have to do as we move forward is to truly embrace that unity, embrace the possibility of our collective power, and work cohesively together. And I think that's the call of ServiceNation. And we are being asked, I think, to create a movement. And it's a movement that encompasses all of us and that includes our private sector friends, our faith-based friends, the nonprofit sector, the political leadership. And so I think that's the call to action here. It begins 2 weeks from now. It begins today as we sign the declarations. And we need this group, the national service community, but also the thought leadership and the true sort of cross-sectoral partnerships that are represented here to get behind this and to really make this bill a reality, because I think it represents a new threshold and a new set of possibilities building upon the amazing history of our service movement.
So there's a network now that's going to be, there are 110 organizations represented here and counting.
Yeah.
And do you see a new umbrella organization growing out of this? Do you see America Forward taking this lead role? I mean, how does it actually happen?
Well, I think that, first of all, I just want to second the commendation to Alan and the Be the Change team. I think they are demonstrating through this movement what's possible when you become a catalyst and pull people together. So I think that they have envisioned a movement that we now need to align with. And America Forward is a part of that, and all of our organizations are now given the opportunity to participate in that. So I think, it is a larger coalition of groups to create change, to think anew about what's possible, but most specifically right now, to focus on a legislative agenda that can really change our nation.
Good.
And David,
When we go to the floor, Alan, can you be one of the people who speaks and address this question about organizationally how you would envision, well, the role of Be the Change and how you see that fitting together? Yes, please.
I just wanted to add something, which is that we all get stuck in our own trap of having to do the day-to-day of our organization and
Right.
just grow our organization. And I think one thing that needs to come out of this is we all need to figure out how to allocate real-time resources of our organizations and of us individually to this movement, because
Right.
it's going to benefit all of us, but you're going to go home and you're going to think about how you're going to fundraise tomorrow and what's going on with the young people in your program or whatever, and you're going to forget or not be able to execute on something. And right now, everybody needs to start committing time and resources to making this legislation a reality.
I understand. Usher, you have a very special magic with the younger generation. How do you think, what would you recommend about the best ways to go about mobilizing the young to sign up and say, yes, I want to serve, I will be there. If you expand AmeriCorps to 250,000, I will be there.
Mobility is unity. It is communicating properly. Our youth need to feel as though they can embrace their service. The priority for me is to incentivize that, to create a reward.
incentivize it?
Yes, to create a reward there. Actually, at the 101 conference a youth leader conference yesterday. We established the youth chair. Very, very, excited to be here and at the face of change. As you've always known, youth has always been at the forefront of change, allowing them to have the proper tools, allowing them to, well, actually I said communication earlier, using forums like Facebook, using forums like MySpace, properly communicating and ultimately having a sense of ownership because they're communicating on a level where there's a common ground there.
Right. What kind of incentives do you think would work best?
Well, the incentives are, one, scholarships, partnerships. The work that I've done with City Year, as well as Public Alliance, obviously says that there's a payoff at the end of the day because I'm now either engaging in rebuilding my community physically for the youth, as well as I'm nervous.
You're never nervous in front
A little bit. But I'm honest. And creating a solution and creating a voice for our youth to feel enfranchised is important for me. I named them yesterday Generation S. For our youth leaders, there has to be a sense of ownership.
Yeah.
As I said, giving them the proper tools and communicating is important.
Yeah. Let me ask you a sensitive question. You have an enormous appeal across racial lines, gender lines, all sorts of lines. You're a universally beloved figure in the younger generation. But I want to ask you about if Barack Obama were to lose, about the African American young people, how they'll respond, how they'll think about this. They'll clearly be disappointed. But how do they respond to the call for service if there's a new administration? How do we heal for those who, some people are going to be very disappointed when this election's over. But you've got a special understanding of the African American community.
Well, I'm hoping for a win. There's something very genuine about Senator Obama, and the one thing is engaging. I think we have to fully engage on every level. To have a leader that leads by example is what I think engages youth. When they feel as though they're not being dictated to, service is not something that should come down by the hand of judgment to say this is what you should do, but more or less this is what we will do together. And that's what I think the youth says and is expecting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mallory,
Yes,
you know this generation better than anybody out here.
I hope so.
Your generation. You're going to be the ones called upon to actually do the service. Do you think your friends, you've seen people all through New Orleans now have responded to the crises there? Mm-hmm. How do you think your generation will respond to a call to service?
I 100% have faith in my generation. I know that they will serve. They will serve. The problem is, or not the problem, but like Usher said, the way that we communicate it to our generation is different. It's important to have elected officials say, call on our generation to serve, but I think that, like you said with Facebook and MySpace and the things that my generation does pay attention to, having these kind of leaders advocate for service will have them learn about it, and eventually we can just say, don't just learn about it, be about it. Go to New Orleans and get a house on your alternative spring break, and then come back. Come back and do an AmeriCorps. Give a year. Give a year in any way that you can. It doesn't have to be City Year or Jumpstart. It can be physical service if that's what you want to do. Or if you can't move yourself, across the country to New Orleans. I moved from Stockton, California, originally 2 years ago. Look at it in your own community. I mean, the need is there all over the country, and we are there all over the country. I know that we will answer the call to serve. We just need to be told about this opportunity. And like you said, about the zip codes. I truly believe, and it's a personal feeling, that serving is one of the few equal opportunities that Americans are provided, and I'm from one of those zip codes that's not of means. And you don't need to be of means to serve. You're not sacrificing, it's a privilege.
She said she was nervous before she got up here. Hadn't she been great? Terrific. Thank you, Mallory. Thank you. Jennifer Frickley, you've been engaged in recruiting every year extraordinarily large numbers of young people into the service. What do you take, about 170,000 a year into the Army?
That's what our recent numbers have been, yes, 170,000.
And so when you hear this idea of AmeriCorps on the civilian side going from 75,000 to 250,000, does that give you pause? Do you have a lot of confidence that that you can raise those numbers in the civilian side? And also, what does it do to, does it crowd out in any way the people who are volunteering for the Army and for the military services?
No, I don't think so at all. Our concern currently is that out of the 10 youth that might come in the Army, ages 17 to 24, only 3 are eligible to come in. 70% of our youth cannot come into our military because of education, conduct, or health.
Health being obesity often?
Childhood obesity, over-reliance on, or reliance on prescription drugs. There's just a lot of health issues in the youth right now. The biggest, 10%, is childhood obesity.
Is that number going up?
It's going up. 32 million 17 to 24-year-olds, 3 million are obese as children. And so we worry in the Army and the military about this strategic problem for the nation on the 7 who can't come in the military. What's going to happen to them? How are they going to generate a nation that has intellectual capital, has the finances to have a strong armed forces to help this nation remain strong? And so these programs that we've been discussing and I'm so encouraged about give opportunity for these youth to realize their potential. And of course, if we can help with that, we want to help with that, and we are. We've opened a preparatory school for those that you cannot come in the military unless you have a high school diploma or a GED. Judy last night mentioned that 70% only had a high school diploma, but the other 30% had GEDs. You cannot join our military unless you have the education. So we've opened a prep school to allow the youth to come in. We have 174 young men and women at Fort Jackson, South Carolina right now who we brought in that did not have an education that we will give a GED to now. And in October, we'll start a program to give them a high school diploma. I see these outreach programs a great way for them to serve, to realize service to the nation, to realize their potential by being a part of something larger than themselves. And we just want to be in the consideration set. We want the word to come out about serving their nation as a soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine, and they'll make the right choice. I trust your generation well also, young woman, because I led them in combat, and they're phenomenal. And we can thank God on our knees that they're in our formation.
Well,
but it's not a threat, but I do think we need to organize. The real material thing, how do we break through? We're not organized locally. The youth tell us that 70% of the youth say everything they want to know they'll find out on the internet. We're not organized on the internet to share all the wonderful things that are happening. And we have to get into social networking. Those powerful testimonies this morning of people whose lives have been changed because of service have got to get out as a personal witness to how their life has been changed by serving in America. And we got to get that word out. We got to let them social network.
It's very interesting. I just want to tell you one of the things that we're so grateful about is that you're here, Chairman came, and that we have a number of military veterans in the audience, and the fact that there's now this coming together of people who've served in the military and people who've served in the civilian sector and see each other as partners and as you know, as brothers and with sisters in the same movement is just one of the, it is part of the breakthrough represented by this service nation.
You know, if I could, I think one of the aspects of breaking through is engaging veterans. And when I say veterans, I mean veterans of AmeriCorps and all these programs, as well as veterans of the armed services to tell their story locally and get them engaged, bring them back and have them speak out. And the other, and I know there's some retirees from the military here, you've got to bring the military retirees into this endeavor, because I'll tell you something, brothers and sisters, they can plan, they can execute, they can mentor, and they can train. So open up the doors and get them in and put them to work.
When this organization comes into force, and whether under whatever umbrella about going from here to there to try to get this not only the legislation passed, but get most importantly mobilizing the young, would you be willing to sit down with some of the folks around you, with the organizers here on the civilian side, and sort of talk through how this could best be done based on your experiences?
Absolutely. I mean, again, we have a program right now in Dallas, Texas called the Dallas Grassroots Program. Right. And that's a coming together of the military and the Dallas political and educational leaders. But we've got to throw these grassroots programs much wider and sit down and talk about what do we bring as a strength, what do you bring as a strength, and how do we work together for the youth of our nation to realize their potential.
Right, right. It's interesting. Colin Powell has often waxed eloquent about the junior NRO to the ROTC programs and how well they've worked in high schools and below. And it's really interesting. If you go into a KIPP school, you think it's much the same environment. It's about let's have order and discipline in here so we can learn. And it's hard work, but it's also, there's a lot of sort of camaraderie and the same sort of thing you see in these. There are a lot of parallels between what you do and what you try to do and what the social entrepreneurs here are doing and people in the national service effort are doing. And there's real room here for synergy. Yeah. That would, and I think people could learn a lot. You've had lots and lots of years of how do you mobilize large numbers to come in and put them productively to work. There's another sensitive issue, and I want to come back to this, and we don't have much time. We're going to go to the floor soon. Vanessa, I want to come back to you, and perhaps others can chip in on this. It was interesting that the Wall Street Journal, in its account this morning of what happened last night, that for most of us who were sitting there, I think we were sort of stunned in some ways at how they each candidate was almost speaking the other person's language, and they seemed to be so similar and so together, and it was obviously a conciliatory error, but they shared the similar goal. But the Journal reported it as presidential candidates differ on national service, and they aired their differences last night as well. And I'm talking to some of you and talking to some Republicans on the outside, I must tell you that there is a difference in the view that many who come out of the Democratic or progressive side bring to the role of government here versus what John McCain brought to the conversation last night. He was saying, yes, there's a role for government, but let's keep remembering to keep a balance. There are so many of these organizations that are on the private side. And I find some reluctance, some caution on the part of some Republicans about saying, let's not have the government take these things over. It will crowd out a lot of the independent spirit that we want in the country, and these organizations that spring up are such a valuable part of neighbor helping neighbor and the traditions that de Tocqueville talked about. So I'm curious, Vanessa, as you talk about a new role for government, whether you think that is a bipartisan understanding or whether, in fact, there remain some differences philosophically about where government fits into the whole national service effort.
I think it's an incredibly important opportunity for us to define that. And it was clear last night that we as a movement haven't done a good enough job yet. But I think this really it's not an either or. It's not about big government or no government. It's not about big government and volunteering. It's really a middle way, which is the nonprofit sector is the fastest growing sector in our society, creating the most jobs right now. 115 nonprofits start a day. But what that doesn't mean, and we want that to be an entrepreneurial sector, and we don't want to squelch the civic leadership that's happening in communities all over, but government can be a partner, just like philanthropists are. And I think if government starts seeing itself as something that invests in what works in our communities, and that the citizens are the ones delivering the great organizations, and government is investing in it. And that's a subtle point, but I think that that's really how AmeriCorps is one of the first organizations where, you know, AmeriCorps represents, there are thousands of organizations that are AmeriCorps. It's not one big government institution, and it's money that is going to organizations, and none of us, city here, would never have gotten to scale without AmeriCorps money. It's basically growth capital. And so it's a new way that government is acting, and I think we have to continue to do that, to continue to have, and I think Republicans and Democrats love the idea we have little money and we have to leverage it, and that this is not a big government program. This is a program that is going to be funding things that work and, you know, focus
And you
on
see a lot of partnerships with the private sector.
Absolutely, yeah. And,
foundations and
yeah,
others
I mean,
to
we could
help
none
fund
of
it.
us could have scaled. AmeriCorps was incredible. Government money's key, but so is philanthropic dollars. And most of the organizations getting the government dollars are majority, you know, private sector funded, and that's really important.
So-
and it keeps the independence.
But to go, if the government comes in and says, okay, we're going to give you 5,000 additional AmeriCorps volunteers for your organization, you've got to get your organization to scale. Government's not going to pay for that.
Exactly. Government doesn't pay for building the capacity, hiring CFOs, all that stuff, you know, and that's okay because we can raise the money in the private sector, I think, to do that. And we do need to scale these organizations.
Okay, I want one last question here, and then there's microphones here if you'd like to come. And perhaps John DiLeo would be the best equipped to respond to this. But are there some differences as well in the faith-based aspect of moving up in AmeriCorps? Certainly at Saddleback, we heard the candidates taking different views on what kind of employment the faith-based organization should engage in. Barack Obama making the argument, if it's government money, they have to be non-discriminatory, and they have to hire whoever, you know, who's the best qualified. And John McCain very strongly of the view, no, wait a minute, if it's faith-based and it's a Catholic group, or a Baptist group, they should be able to hire a Baptist or a Mormon or a Catholic or whatever it may be. Does anybody here want to take a crack at that, about whether you see any landmines out there and how to deal with them on the faith base? Michelle?
Well, I would just say, I think that the most remarkable thing, despite the Wall Street Journal coverage, is that there was great commonality between our two candidates. And I think one of the things you see now is, you know, AmeriCorps was, if we can remember, and it was not very long ago, that it was not enjoying bipartisan support. We now have very strong bipartisan support. We have President Bush endorsing a faith-based initiative, and with some controversy, we have now Barack Obama talking about a faith-based initiative. So there are going to be differences. We are going to sort through those differences. That's what the messy legislative electoral process is about. But I think what I would stress is the import of us communicating the possibility of the unity that we really do represent. We represent the idea that AmeriCorps and National Service is the perfect complement for community volunteering. For every AmeriCorps member that we engage dozens and you know, literally in some cases hundreds of thousands of volunteers. There's not an either or there. We're talking about a new way of investing, in one that allows government to play the role that it can around bringing things to scale, at the same time, you know, creating the local entrepreneurship and that civic grassroots leadership that is traditionally viewed as a conservative value. So I actually think we see much more convergence here that is what we need to build upon.
Good, that's very constructive. Alan, we'll call for your question. Yes, ma'am, you have the first question. There's a microphone. Alan, we'll make sure you're heard. There's I think another microphone somewhere in that area, another one over here. But you're up first.
I
You're
want to
right off
make a
here.
comment and then ask a question.
Yes, ma'am.
The comment is that you want to look at the future, you look at the present. And if you look at the present, you have to go back and look at the past. Many of us that are boomers love Usher, although he's young, because he brings a certain vibrancy that has been discussed here.
Reminds you of your past, right?
Reminds me of my present as well. But
Good
And
for you.
I'm a member of AARP, and we have the largest growing number of individuals that give service. Not only that, we also have a platform where we've engaged every state and territory. I come from a very small place, the Virgin Islands. Every state and territory in making Divided We Fail, which looks at healthcare reform and economic security and issue. The reason I come to the platform and say that is that you're looking at how you organize, and AARP really can be the past that brings you to the present. Now the question in reference to the future. I think that there is a growing sense, especially in the African American community, that we are losing our young people, and especially our young men. They're more in prison than they're out there in the schools. So my question is to Usher. You talked about really giving them scholarships and so forth, yet the military says they're not prepared. They don't have the education. You know, they maybe they're in drugs, maybe they have obesity, all of these issues. How are we going to get them to really turn around and really become engaged, as we all are engaged in your music and your vitality and the things that you bring so much to the American public? Thank you.
Good question.
Well, it's not a one-sided question. Obviously, military, I can't answer that, but to change that standard is a priority for me. To engage youth on every level possible is the priority. Differently from military, high-risk communities, they do have a very high going rate of dropouts, drugs, crime. You begin to change that view by doing something positive. And in this instance, I lead as an example. For instance, I spoke earlier about engaging, specifically talking about our president or whomever is calling for action. By engaging, you lead by example. So every year, I make my way to New Orleans to re-engage with something that I started 3 years ago. I said that I would be the voice then, and I'm still the voice today. The same thing with the 101 youth leaders. I made a pledge to them yesterday that I would be their voice. Of course, they are all individually going in different directions. Some people spoke about rebuilding their communities and having the proper tools to do so. Being able to take volunteerism and bring about change as a result of a cause that they support. A young lady and her sister raised money for cancer for a cause because of a death of their grandfather. Raising close to $200,000. Engaging, leading by example, that is the key.
I would just comment that we have 1,645 Army junior ROTC programs in high schools, which are a civics program. We have 280,000 men and women in those programs as an outreach and a give back to America to try to keep our kids in school. I think we need to have a national outcry to keep the kids in school, get them involved in boys and girls clubs, ROTC programs, schools, and we've got to move the youth from, some of them, from sort of believing that they're entitled, that America owes them something, which we as adults have given them that perception, to empowering them and giving them projects and things to do in their local hometowns to make the nation better, and move from entitlement to empowerment, and that service will come and they'll grow from the service that they've given the nation. But we have to organize to do that, and as adults give them those messages and those hopes to move to be an empowered person who can achieve their potential.
Good. Thank you. I'm not sure, that was the hook that just floated across the stage here. But I'm not sure, is that Hillary Pennington? I can't quite see. But you're up.
No, I'm not Hillary Pennington.
Okay, fine.
Dorothy Stoneman. Dorothy Stoneman.
I'd like to be Hillary Pennington, and I like Hillary
Dorothy
Pennington.
Stone. Oh, okay, good. Others can see, I can't. Please,
Okay.
you've got the microphone.
All right, okay. This is Dorothy Stoneman from Youth Build USA.
Good, terrific.
And I support everything you're saying, and I think, and I want to bring a risk and an opportunity to our attention to plan ahead. I think that the leaders in this room, galvanized by Alan Casey and brilliantly led by Alan, as he's done over the years, coupled with all of our grassroots constituencies and the leaders back home, have created possibly the most robust and creative and promising coalition to reach inspiring national goals that exist in the United States today, with more bipartisan support. This is really a religious experience being here. Here's my worry, and I think it's an opportunity. Once we get this legislation passed, then the $3 billion appropriation goes into one appropriation bill. It's the Labor HHS Appropriations Bill, where the Department of Education, the Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Labor, and the Corporation and National Community Service reside, and all of their funding has to go through that bill. Much of the funding that exists for national programs that serve to alleviate poverty and provide a safety net for the poorest people in the United States, as well as opportunity for higher education, is packed into that one appropriations bill, which is only one of 14 appropriations bills. There is no national movement equivalent to this one, and this is the opportunity, that is united in increasing the proportion of federal funds that goes into the Labor HHS Appropriations Bill. If we don't unite with the other coalitions to address that danger, we could inadvertently be in direct competition with some of the resources that are most desperately needed in the communities that we serve. So my question for Alan, for Vanessa, for David, for whoever's thinking about this is, have we thought about this yet? And can we, all of us, use this incredible base that we have to build the broader coalition that could make sure that we don't inadvertently do harm when we are determined to do so much good?
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a good question. The conveners are asking us to shut down here pretty quickly. You are here. Harris Wofford has indicated he would like to speak, and Alan, I think we all want to hear from you before we leave. Do you have a very brief question? And is it, if you could move directly to the question with a question mark at the end of it?
Sure. Well, first, I'm Paula Broadwell. I'm a major in the military, and I'm very proud to have served my country. I'm now in the reserves, and I hope that I can stay involved in serving my country through ServiceNation and other activities. So tapping into veterans, regardless of our age, I think is a wonderful idea, and I hope that this umbrella can do that. My question is, can a U.S. National Service Academy or Public Service Academy, which is in the works, can it be effective, and can it draw this new generation, and will it compete with the military academies, and what do you think the feasibility of such an initiative is? If social networking is so important, the U.S. military academies and graduates and alumni and military officers in general, we have easily are able to talk to each other and adapt and find common ground, and I think that could happen through a public service academy. Anyone, do you have any feelings on the efficacy?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for your service. Do you have a brief response, Vanessa?
Well, and I love your response as well, but I think it's incredibly important to have sort of the same kind of academy for public service that we've had for the military, and I think it will inspire a generation in all sorts of ways. So I'm very excited about it, and I don't know what the reaction to the military, what do you all think about that idea?
I welcome it. I mean, speaking for me, I think it would be tremendous, and I don't think it's in direct competition with any of our service academies, because there's a whole lot of people out there that would like to be educated at an institution of higher learning and where they can serve. From my time in Afghanistan, we had tremendous folks from USAID, United States Department of Agriculture, and United States State Department, but I think we need a National Service Academy to help grow leaders for the public and private sector to help America, and, as she mentioned, to be networked then and have an alumni association that can reach out and speak out and embolden people to serve. So I welcome it, and I know there's lots in here that would like to get after it sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Yep. Harris? Harris Wofford, whom we all look to.
David and this great panel, this quantum leap that we're talking about leaves us with a case for large-scale public investment, and then the question, how do you get to these numbers? And the Civilian Conservation Corps, which we're on the Day of Action joining and celebrating the 75th anniversary of, is a thing for us to take as a challenge and an encouragement. The reason President Kennedy and Sergeant Shriver, in my opinion, were so confident that it could be 100,000 Peace Corps volunteers, and Shriver said Vista should be 500,000. It's that when Franklin Roosevelt came into office, on his desk was a report that there were 500,000 young men out of school, out of work, on the streets of America. And he called in Frances Perkins, the first woman cabinet member of the Labor Department and the head of the War Department and the head of the Interior Department, and said, I want a plan to get all those boys in the woods. And I want you to have a plan within 2 weeks, I think he said. They came in with the plan that the military would build the camps and provide the supervision for the young men. The Interior Department would find the hardest jobs on public lands that were needed, and the Labor Department would recruit the CCC members. Congress passed it within 30 days, a 1.5 page bill authorizing Civilian Conservation Corps with funds up to providing a membership for 500,000 young men. Roosevelt signed it and said, by the end of summer, I want 250,000 boys in the woods. July 31st, Colonel George C. Marshall and the other military people building the camps reported that in 1,600 camps, there were more than 300,000 young men, and the CCC moved up to the 500,000 level. And that's something to remember, and we did it before, we can do it again. And what is in fact a little point, because it doesn't have to be such a big problem on the faith-based initiatives. Vanessa's point about AmeriCorps being a hybrid, it isn't just a government agency at all. It is primarily a recruiting of resources and human capital for the independent sector. The AmeriCorps, the original first domestic Peace Corps, VISTA, from the very beginning, supplied vistas to faith-based organizations, to programs, daycare and homeless shelters run by nuns, whole range of religious organizations. They have a whole tradition of not paying for proselytizing, not permitting the non-discriminatorily selected vistas, no proselytizing. AmeriCorps has continued that tradition. It is Alliance for Catholic Education, for example, was contested in Congress because AmeriCorps members were teaching in underserved southern, largely minority schools. And the court upheld it. They were not proselytizing. VISTA, the AmeriCorps members, this was a Notre Dame-run program, a great AmeriCorps program. It's been upheld by the court. It doesn't solve the whole problem of separation of church and state for some people, but it's been constitutionally upheld, and it's one of the opportunities for solving that problem.
Harris, when the Congress comes to hold hearings on Kennedy Hatch, I think all of us join in hoping you're the first person to testify.
Yes.
Thank you.
That's a date.
Final word, Alan.
Thank you. First of all, can we hear it for this panel? They're fabulous. Very briefly, because we're just running a tiny bit late. This is an extraordinary gathering, and the coalition that has come together is so inspiring. I really appreciate, Dorothy, what you said. This has been a collective effort, along with Be the Change. There are 4 organizations that are coordinating this coalition. Civic Enterprises, led by my dear friend and partner and brother, John Bridgeland. And, of course, City Year, by my brother for more than 27 years now, led by Michael Brown and Ann Maura Connolly. And, you know, the outstanding leader that's sitting on the stage, Michelle Nunn, and Points of Light Institute. And I think that's why it's worked, because it's been a collaborative effort from the beginning. And from those 4, it's now grown to 114, reaching 100 million Americans. We want to continue it to grow. And I am so thrilled, I have to say a word, to have General Frakely here, and to have your leadership is extraordinary, and your commitment because we need to learn from you and to have the chairman. So we are building this. To respond to the questions, we're going to figure it out together. We're doing a meeting Saturday morning. Yeah, our work doesn't end. We're meeting Saturday morning from 9 to 12 at Time's graciously donated their space, and we're going to bring all the leaders of this coalition. Any of you that want to stay for it, you're welcome to. But the leaders of the organizations are going to come together, and we're going to spend that morning to plot the strategy for the next steps. So we will figure out the answers to these questions. We're all committed to this. The organizers are committed to this into the long haul for the next year, year and a half at least. And also, it's not just about the legislation. I want to point that out. That's very, very important. We're thrilled to have Senators Kennedy and Hatch and Senator McCain and Obama. That's unprecedented. I don't ever remember a time when two presidential nominees in the midst of the general election campaign join hands on the same piece of legislation. That is huge. And we need to run with that. So the legislation is important, but what's more important is how we take the energy here and change the culture of the country. So we have private sector leaders here. We have extraordinary university president leaders here from academia. We have faith-based leaders here. We have civic leaders here. We have military leaders here. We have governmental leaders here. So the legislation is very important, and we need to get that done. But we also need to take the energy that's here and say, how do we change the culture of our country so that everybody does have an opportunity to serve and everybody seizes it? But in terms of the specific strategies, we're going to meet Saturday morning and we're going to figure it out together. Thank you all very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're adjourned. Thank you. Thank you all.